Hi everyone and welcome to our latest Social Snippets webinar where we're going to be exploring the 5 tips for great community management. So I'd like to introduce myself. My name's Gareth. I'm the training consultant here at Isentia 2 Social and I'm going to take you through the content today. What we're going to look at first is the role of the community manager. So just have a bit of a chat about what the community manager does and some pillars around what makes a great community manager. Then we're going to jump into the 5 tips. Now, these 5 tips are actually being compiled by our Always On team, who are embedded community managers within our clients. So they live and breathe this every day. So they've gone ahead and pulled their 5 pro tips for outstanding community management, and we'll share those tips with you guys today. And then finally, we're going to wrap up just by having a look at the importance of the community manager. So why it's so important to get it done right for any organization or any business. So let's jump straight into it. So let's have a chat about the community manager role first. For those of you who are community managers, some of this might not be the newest information, but it's really good just to have a little quick look at it and have a look at some of the real pillars around what we do on a daily basis. So a community manager is an individual who controls the day-to-day operations of any social media community, whether that's Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn. So there's day-to-day aspects. This could be posting, replying to comments, replying to posts, etc. All that day-to-day stuff that we plan out from a quarterly or a monthly basis and really action every single day. Also monitors the brand's presence on social media. So this is monitoring things such as sentiment, what people are saying in and around your organization, all those conversations that are relevant to us where people are talking about our brand or our organization. It's a really important part as well because social is a great way of getting an understanding about or a temperature check about what people are talking about that's relevant to us. The third part is also reporting on the performance of the brand on its social presence. There's a lot of different metrics that all three platforms spit out at us, from likes, comments, retweets, all those sorts of things. So it's important to report on those. But the one thing that we always stress is make sure you're reporting on, or at least highlighting, those things that are relevant to what you're actually trying to achieve on the platforms. Like I mentioned, we get so much information from how many people are following us and liking our pages, right through to some of the nitty-gritty facts. So it's most important that we really shine a light on those reporting aspects, which are most important to what we're trying to achieve. Number 4 is being the voice of the brand on social media. It's really important to think about not just how our organization wants to sound, what tone of voice we want to use, etc., but also how our audience would like to hear us talk. So really thinking about our audience, who's our target demographic, who are the stakeholders that are listening to us on social media, and how should we be speaking to best communicate with them? And finally, also, a community manager is an individual who understands and provides insights based on statistics. Like I mentioned, we get a whole spit out about all that information. So it's in a matter of analyzing that, getting an understanding, providing feedback to all the different internal stakeholders, as well as making sure that we're fine-tuning our own work on the platforms. A lot of the information that we get on social media is information we wouldn't previously have had access to. A lot of these are discussions and conversations that we would have had around a barbecue, etc., about brands and organizations. And not only that, but it also increases the likelihood of our audience reaching out and having a discussion with us. So it's a great way to get those insights and information and pass them on to the relevant internal parties, whether that's product, whether that's marketing, PR, whatever the case is. Community manager gets all this great information and then can provide insights on that. So we have what we call our 7 commandments of community management, or the 7 pillars about what really makes a good community manager. And the first one is you have to be the social media specialist in the room. That's a tough ask. Social media is so dynamic. I mean, there's not a day that doesn't go by, or there's not a day that goes by that I don't jump on the social media, one of the platforms, and something's changed. Whether it's the user interface, whether it's the targeting mechanisms on the advertising, it's such a fluid industry. And so it's tough to keep on top of all the different trends and different going-ons, but it's an important aspect too. We need to be the social media experts so that when people ask us questions, we can give them the specialist responses. Now, the second commandment is you shall facilitate conversation and maintain an engaged community. That's what we're talking about here, is not just responding to posts. Like, we can all do those responding to posts and tweets, etc., but really trying to facilitate that conversation, really try to keep that dialogue going between yourself and your stakeholders. Now, that's the tough part, but it's really important because that will create such an engaged audience, such an engaged community that will want to come back and will want to continually talk to us. So where possible, we really want to try to facilitate that conversation. Third one is you shall create relevant, meaningful content that resonates with your audience. Now this, when we put it down there on a slide, it sounds ridiculously easy. It's quite tough though, isn't it? But that's why people are following it. That's why people have liked our page, because they want to see this relevant and meaningful content. So it's an important part of the community manager. You may not be the person that creates it on a daily basis, but at least having an insight and understanding as to what would constitute relevant and meaningful content. The fourth is you shall listen to what your audience discusses online and act on it. And this sort of ties into that third point as well. What is your audience saying? They won't always be talking to us. They won't always be tweeting at us or commenting on our timeline page. So making sure that we listen to that, jumping on the forums and realize what our audience is discussing and what they want to chat about. Number 5, you shall be helpful, informative, and friendly to your fans and followers. It sounds really simple, but it really does go a long way. Even if we get a comment on one of our pages, it's a positive one, making sure that we really get engaged. Don't just like the post, but really engage them. Give them a big warm hug, for lack of a better term, and make sure they're really feeling the love from our organization pages. Number 6 is you shall find the sweet spot, what your audience likes discussing and what you want to talk about. Now, this sort of ties into point 3 here. We are really great at knowing what we want to talk about. We know all the great things that our organization is doing. We have fantastic products or great work that we're doing in the community, or we've got great pieces of thought leadership coming out from our internal stakeholders. But we've also got to marry that up against what our audience likes discussing. What is it that our audience is really vibing at the moment, and trying to find that sweet spot between the two of them. When you find that sweet spot, that's when your content really sings. That's when your audience really becomes engaged, because you're making it relevant to them. And so it's tough, but that is a really, really key part of being a community manager. And the 7th one, you shall be cool, calm, and swift in the event of a crisis. Now, for anyone who's ever gone through a social media crisis before, maybe even just me mentioning that's brought back some cold chills, or made you had to sit up straight in your chair and have a little bit of a flashback to that horrible time, because they can be quite gnarly. But the important thing is obviously be cool and calm when we have a crisis, but be swift. Things can change so quickly on social media. When it comes to Facebook, an article will receive half of its social shares within 9.5 hours of breaking. So it's a really fluid platform. Things move very quickly. So you need to be on the ball when it comes to a crisis, and make sure you're ready to react and have mechanisms in place for that. So that's the community manager. That's the community manager in a nutshell. Let's jump straight into those 5 tips and see what they can do to help you and your organization on your community management on social media. So the first one, integrate community management. So what's integrating community management? What do I mean here? Well, realistically, what we don't want to do is think of community management or social media in general as a separate element to your business. It can't be an afterthought. It really needs to be integrated into your planning, your strategic thoughts, whether you do it at a quarterly or a monthly basis. It really needs to be part of your thought plans and action plans. So depending on whether you're trying to integrate customer service, marketing, communications, you really need a synergistic approach to your community management and your other actions and plans. Don't make it an afterthought, because otherwise it comes off that way. You're slapping up articles and so forth after the fact, but it needs to be part of that strategic planning process. Now, here's an example of this: a 730 report where paracetamol safety became under the spotlight, and Children's Panadol was well aware of this. It was part of their communications plan. They understood what this article and what this content meant to them as an organization, and they had an action plan about how to handle that on these social channels. So it's not just about what you want to talk about as an as an organization, but what is going on in the industry. How are you going to handle these conversations? How can you build that into your social discussions as well? The second tip, clear approval chains. Now, this is one of the aspects that I think will really help a beginner community manager or even a pro one who's been around for a little while really cut down their time and stop reinventing the wheel. So there's two parts to what I'm talking about here when we talk about clear approval change. So first off is escalations. So make sure you have a proper escalation process in place. If the proverbial hits the fan, how do you get this issue up the flag? How do you get people engaged to make sure that you can handle it in a timely manner? And the important thing about that is document it. Make sure it's available, because in the event that you need to go back to it, or even in the face that you may not be on that day and someone's taking over the reins, it needs to be documented, including timelines, so you know that you can get back to the you can respond to these comments within a specific SLA or standard operating procedure. Now, the other aspect is really having that chain and that link sorted within your organization. Making sure that your SMEs or your subject matter experts, that you've got clear communications with them when you require their input. Whether that's, unfortunately, us as community managers, we're never going to know absolutely everything when it comes to going on to the business. It may be to do with legal or maybe to do with the product, and we may need to ask these questions of these subject matter experts. So it's important to have these approval chains and these conversations nice and fluid and in a working document form. Now, we quite often use something like Google Docs as a great way to keep a concise record and manage these internal processes. And that way, all internal stakeholders have access to it and they can see it. This will really cut down that stress when there are challenges on social media. When you do get that question that you feel you need to answer immediately, but you don't have the knowledge. It's really important as well to, for lack of a better term, hold other people within your organization accountable for timelines. It's really important that not everyone is going to take social media as seriously as you. For some other people, it may be an afterthought to their general role. So by holding them to some level of time frame, that way you'll make sure that you're always getting responses for your community as soon as possible. Number 3, get your facts right. Get your FAQs, or your frequently asked questions, right. Now, we all have a list or a bunch of questions that we tend to get asked, whether it's online on social media or offline through emails, etc. And it's really important to first off, think of those questions. What are these questions or comments that we are getting asked regularly? Next, create a response list. Create an approved response list that you can readily access, that you can go back onto your social channels, copy and paste, and away you go. That way you'll have an organic list of questions and answers that will really cut down your time in responses. That way when you get these curly questions, it may not be your area of expertise, you have these responses readily available to you. That being said, when you're compiling these answers, please don't lose sight of the fact that this is social media. Don't go and put the corporate into social media and have responses like from your IVR, where it's really structured when they call and press 2 for customer service and 3 for product information. So make sure that you've got a really socially adaptable way of talking within your frequently asked questions. The brand tone of voice really needs to be human and not an auto reply. If you're copying and pasting responses and not altering them, it'll show through and you will look robotic and automated on social media, which is the last thing you want to do. So here's an example of this. So PwC Australia's got a question, a bit of a curly one. It's talking about an initiative that was done by the American branch. Now, as mentioned, the local community manager is not going to know all the goings on of all the different branches worldwide. So as you can see, the first response there has come back and said, "Thanks for getting in touch, Cameron. We're looking into this at the moment, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can." So it's obviously a standardized approved response to get to come back to this this audience member and with an appropriate response. Now, where it can go wrong, what you shouldn't do. Now, this is an example of a customer who's posted on Domino's website, and they've actually thrown up an image of their pizza and gone, "Best pizza ever, Pan Pizza, keep up the good work, guys." So they're pretty thrilled. I mean, this is a really great example of an engaged audience member and a positive one too. What's happened though is Domino's, as you can see here, has come back with an automated reply that's gone, so sorry about that. Please share some additional information with us, and have provided the information there of where they can get in touch with them. So they've provided what is a response to what would be a negative comment. So there's two important things to note here. First off is that you always, as a community manager, need to make sure that you're reading the question or the comment clearly. Make sure you're present. The second part is, if you notice there, it hasn't been customized. You really want to make sure that you're customizing your responses. Yes, we want to have that frequently asked questions list, and to a degree, we're going to copy and paste those responses across. But we always want to use the individual's name, and as much as possible, customize it to their query specifically. People are very good at recognizing automated responses on social media because it's not conducive to the platform. So make sure that as much as possible, you're reading through the question, being present, and customizing it for that audience member. Number 4. So our fourth tip is be proactive in community management. Now, this is definitely the part that takes a little bit of extra legwork, but really pays off dividends for us. So when people talk about us, good or negative, it's not always going to be directed at you. People aren't always going to be tweeting at you, and people aren't always going to be coming to your Facebook page, your Facebook timeline to post and comment. Conversations are not usually in these what we call own channels. They're outside of that. So what we want to do is listen and monitor blogs, forums, things like Reddit, etc., to get a better understanding of your community and what they're saying about you and your industry. Things such as topics, trends, sentiment issues, all these things are going to be discussed off your own channels. So it's important as much as possible to monitor these, to see what's going on. So let's have a look at 2 examples of this. So on the left here, we've got a community forum about quitting, people quitting smoking. As you can see here, 2 comments are screenshotted where someone's come on and gone, I'm using patches, some days I do well. Another one where someone's yelled out that they've replaced smoking with food, saying that they're huge now, but still better than smoking with asthma. Pledge to Quit has jumped in and given a little bit of positive reinforcement to these people, really geeing them up, giving them that positive go around and a pat on the back. So this is a standard forum as well, yet this brand has jumped in there and had that discussion with them, really got engaged with their audience. On the right there's a tweet from the appropriately named Nasty Girl, who's thrown up a tweet to her audience. There's no hashtags or anything, just to her audience, and she's gone that she doesn't really care when people threaten her with the virus because she's using Norton. She's feeling really safe, and she's pretty stoked with the product she's got. Now, Norton has seen this tweet and have jumped in and gone, you tell them, girl, Norton's got your back. Thanks for choosing us. Now, in both of these examples, really positive reinforcement, positive engagement to their audience. Can you imagine if you're sitting there, you've posted or you've tweeted out, and a brand that's relevant to your tweet has come in and got engaged with you? It's a really, really fantastic way of building an engaged audience and jumping in there and having those discussions. Now, our 5th tip really sounds very, very basic when we have it there on the slide. Do your research. Now, to illustrate this, my Year 12 teacher, he gave us some great advice before we did our HSC, and he said that if you're sitting there in an exam and you don't know the answer, just make one up. Now, that really doesn't fly on social media. You're always a screenshot away from ending up on Lanebook or Failblog or one of those sort of sites for having a lack of a handle on the situation. So what we're talking about here is if you don't know a term, maybe someone's thrown something like YOLO or BAY or NKOTB at you, don't bluff it. Google it. Make sure that you understand what people are talking about, whether it's a terminology or whether it's a product or whether it's just a trend. Make sure you know what you're talking about before you respond. Same goes for things like trending hashtags, etc. You want to make sure that you know what your audience is talking about before you get jumped in on those conversations. So here's an example, a bit of a poignant one as well. So this is from a pizza restaurant. They probably would have jumped into Twitter one morning, had a look at those trending hashtags down the left-hand pane, and they've seen hashtag why I stayed, and they've gone, got a great way of getting a little bit of extra engagement. Hashtag why I stayed, you had pizza. Boom. Seems pretty harmless enough right there, packaged up, a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. Unfortunately, this was a hashtag that was being used for support and outreach for sufferers of domestic violence. So as you can imagine, given that context, it's a really insensitive tweet. They copped absolute massive flack. A couple hundred tweets at them. Obviously, no one really too impressed with the tweet they've sent out, given the context of the discussion. Admittedly, though, this is an example of good and bad community management. Bad because all it would have taken was a click on that hashtag to see what the discussion was and realize that this was not a discussion they should be throwing pizza into the mix of. But good in the fact that after the proverbial hit the fan for them, they went back and responded. Not only made a tweet public about their apologies, etc., but they went and responded to each individual tweet that they'd received from random Twitter handles. So they went back and responded to each one of those and apologized for the insensitive tweet, which, whilst it could have been very avoided, is a great example about going back and taking responsibility for what they've done. Occasionally, we're all going to stuff up on social media, but it's important to be transparent and genuine. And in the case of this, sticking your hand up and saying, yep, you know what we did was a bit stupid. Apologies. So that's the 5 tips, guys. But let's just have a quick chat about the community manager and why it's so important to organizations and brands on social media. Now, I'd like to illustrate this with our little friend here covering his ears. Have you ever walked into a store and been completely ignored by the staff there? Have you ever felt completely invisible? Well, what I'd like you to do is think about the fact that effectively by having a social media presence, you are a tenant in the social media shopping center. And so if someone tweets at you, if someone comes to your page and comments and tries to get engaged with you, it's effectively like you putting your hands over your ears or being that sales attendant that slowly begins to slide out the back or hide under a newspaper. You want to make sure that you're actually engaging with the people who are trying to come and speak to you. So don't be that person holding their ears or ignoring their customers. Now, if that's not encouragement enough, if you don't respond to your audience, in some cases, someone else will. Here's an example of the fake help desks that are sort of kicking around on social at the moment. So here's Helena's, and she's thrown a comment over to Arby's and said, "Dear Arby's, your BLT looks nothing like on TV or on your signage. This is fraud." Now, this fake customer service handle has come back and gone, "Hi, Helena's. The food in our commercials are like a Tinder profile picture. Everything looks great until you see it in person. Hope this explanation helped." So as you can see, this is actually handled a Facebook account that's handled by an American comedian. Very tongue-in-cheek, pretty funny. But obviously, because Arby's didn't jump back in and respond to it quickly enough, this person's jumped on board and thrown up this rather humorous response. Another example for Target. This example is even more poignant because someone's actually used the Target logo for their fake customer service handle. Nikki's gone across and gone, "Are you seriously not separating boys and girls' toys anymore? It's ridiculous." The fake handle's come back and gone, "Nikki, we invite you to come and separate the toys for yourself. We just personally can't keep doing it anymore. It's a lot of work." So you can imagine the feeling for someone who's just posted on this brand page and got that sort of response. In some cases, it's not always going to be as funny as this, though. It could be worse, and your community may turn on you. I'm sure we've all seen examples where someone's posted a complaint on an organization's or brand's timeline, and other audience members have jumped on and begun to put the boot in. That's what we don't want. We want to make sure that we're there and engaging and being seen to engage with our audience and respond to their comments as soon as possible. Don't let your audience bring you down and jump in and start having those discussions for you. Make sure you're there as a very, very obvious and very visual presence. So guys, that brings us to the end of our webinar content today. I just want to recap those 5 pro tips from our Always On community managers one more time. Number 1, integrate your community management. Make sure it's not an afterthought and make sure it's part of your strategic planning and thinking whenever you do it, whether it's per quarter or per month. Number 2, have those clear approval chains. Build those escalation documents and make sure you hold those other people to your in your business accountable for those timelines. You're accountable to your audience, so make sure you're getting that information in a timely manner. Number 3 was get your facts right. Get that list of frequently asked questions and responses so that when you do get those questions, you can respond very, very quickly. But please make sure that you're customizing them to the individual you're talking to. 4 was all about being proactive, making sure we're getting involved in those earned discussions out there on social media, jumping on the forum, seeing what people are discussing in and around our organization. And 5, do your research. Don't be one of those screenshots that pops up because you didn't do the research about what your audience was talking about. The whole fake it till you make it doesn't quite work on social media, so make sure that you know what your audience is talking about before you respond. So guys, thanks for your time. Hope this was really helpful to you, whether you're a social media beginner or whether you're a community manager that's been kicking around for a while. Look out for our next Social Snippets webinar. Until then, all the best out there on social.